Did you know that Child of Light is a certified bop? What is a bop? I don't know, but I can guess best over pizza? Why is this relevant? It's not, but we are going to make Rubella's floating sky balloon house, like right now. Let's start with the basics. This here is a log plank that I fashioned myself from a tree that recently gave up the ghost. Side note, the benefit of cutting your own platforms is that you get all of this free sawdust that is perfect for flocking, or a perfect prank on oatmeal eaters. Back to the base, we need to create a coney shape on the bottom, and my mind thought Tropicana. But we only require the very top, so let's cut it off. But watch out, flimsy plastic can sometimes be harder than metal.
Now that's a lot of damage!
Okay, that was a fail. Let's finish that cut with trusted scissors. After a thorough sanding, we strengthen the flimsy plastic with not one but two poorly cut pieces of ready board. With that, it was now ready to meet the wood plank, and that matching with wood and plastic is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. So let's cover it up. Yes, we're going to use real bark from a real tree. Applying this bark could not be more simple. I just hot glued choice pieces of bark all the way around. The goal was just to cover up the plastic and create the coney shape that we desired. Just to recap things, Rebuilds murdered a tree to make the platform, then stripped another of its bark to make the cone shape. But in his defense, I was going to plug this hole, but hey, spiders need homes too, y'all, so we'll leave it. Okay, I didn't like the gray look of the bark, so I gave it a quick scraping with a wire brush until it looked more brown, less gray. Oh, and I washed this bark, by the way. I forgot to say it earlier. Now I could paint this whole thing in an attempt to match the game more, but the way the bark looks is better than my painting could ever be, so we're going to leave it. But I am going to paint the top plank. I'm using two different shades of brown that was loosely mixed together to paint the platform. I tried my best to match the bark and it came out pretty alright. It actually doesn't matter much. Most of all this platform is going to be covered up with junk anyway. Speaking of pointlessness, I gave the platform a quick dry brushing of a light brown. And with that, the base was done. A little different from the video game, but I think it will work. Next on the list is Rubella's cute little igloo house. To get the dome shape, I'm going to use this 2-liter bottle. Doctor flavor, only the best. Of this bottle, we only need the top. And once again, this plastic is flimsy as a Gen Z's constitution, so I strengthen it with various pieces of ready board that were placed in the positions where they would look as ugly as possible, but also give the dome the most support. The igloo shape came out great, but it's a little big for the base. I kind of figured that it would be, but I really wanted to use the pop bottle, so we're just gonna live with it. Next we're going to look very closely at Rubella's house, and for the life of me I can't tell what in the world it's made out of. But I can guess that it's some kind of cloth, or in other words, a tent structure. I guess this because Rubella is from the circus, and that gives me tent vibes, so we're going with that. To make this plastic nightmare look like a tent, we're going to be practicing the art of paper mache. It will be Rebuilds' first attempt at this type of crafting. I decided to use tissues instead of newspaper because I haven't bought a newspaper in years, so I don't have any. And I will be using glue instead of flour because I don't like the smell that the flour and water give off when mixed. And there always is a chance of mold when using flour, so glue is the choice. Okay, pay close attention to this recipe because this is what Rebuilds used for all the paper mache in this video. A bunch of Elmer's glue, some Mod Podge, and a little water mixed thoroughly, and that's it. No measuring, just throwing it together because that's how Rebuilds rolls. And for you folks that need a recipe to hold your hand, here are the correct proportions I got from a much smarter and better crafter's website. Applying this glue tissue paper mache was simple. I dunked a folded tissue in and let it soak. This is where you can see the advantages of using tissues here because they hold together surprisingly well when wet. I just laid each piece on the igloo until all the plastic and foam was covered. I fiddled around with it until I was happy with the look, and when it was done it looked like this. I think it's reasonable to say it looks sort of like a cloth tent. Or would that be a cloth igloo? Do cloth igloos even exist? While the igloo dried, I built the door. I started with a cardboard template and covered it with multiple cut pieces of wood that matched the game pretty well. If you were wondering about the scale, I honestly didn't pay much attention to the size of anything I built in this video. If it looked good to the eye, then I went with it. Back to the now dry igloo, I attached our newly made door, and I almost forgot about the chimney, but I remembered just in time to add it right here. And the igloo tent thing was done. It needs paint, but we'll do that later. The next thing we have to face is the balloon, and let me tell you, this was a 4-day long build, so let's just get into it. Obviously, the balloon needs to be paper mache, so we require a mold, and that will be played by a Dollar Tree balloon. A red one, to be exact. Just like with the igloo, I mixed up my glue sap and started applying the tissues carefully around the balloon, lest I pop the darn thing, which was a constant threat given how fragile a Dollar Tree balloon is. This is what it looked like when one full layer of tissues was applied, and I could have put on more layers, but I was afraid that it would be too heavy on the balloon, so I stopped here and let it dry for a whole 24 hours. A quick note on what I mean about layers. When I take one tissue and fold it in half, this is what I mean when I say full layer. All tissues folded in this way, placed entirely around the balloon, makes up one full layer. Got it? Okay, let's move on. This is 1 day later, and the first layer is dry, but it's nowhere near strong enough to hold its own shape without the balloon. So that's what I did for the next 3 days, layer after layer until I was sure it could hold its own shape. 4 full layers in total, letting each layer dry overnight. So yes, I babysitted my paper mache balloon for 4 days straight, and only then was I satisfied or brave enough to remove the balloon. Let me tell you, if this thing deflates the moment I remove the balloon, I'm gonna have severe
Emotional damage!
With the balloon removed in somewhat of a gross fashion, you can see that we had a perfect spider butt. I mean a perfect paper mache balloon that will, if careful, last forever. The balloon is almost done. We just need to add a stem or something to attach it to the base. This is what I came up with. I'm not sure what or where I got these plastic bits, but I'm pretty sure they are balloon related. I glued the pieces together with super glue, and it reminded me of a wagon axle, which reminded me of that one anime where that headless woman, I think her name was Celty, turned her wagon into a motorcycle. What does this have to do with the balloon? Nothing, but it does remind me that I have to do more anime related builds on this channel. I hot glued the stem onto the balloon, making absolutely sure that I saturated it with enough glue to hold even the most tenacious fake balloon in place. Then I covered the plastic with more paper mache. Once dry, the balloon was done and ready for paint. Later. First, we're going to kick off this painting circus with the igloo, and of course, just like always, Rebuilds blows it right off the bat. It did start okay. I base coated the igloo in a nice chocolate brown, and then I thought I could just take the same brown, add white to it, and use it to weather the igloo tent. That's what I thought, anyway.
Bruh.
No. It looks like raw meat. Only on Rebuilds will you ever hear the sentence, meat igloo. When I realized my horrific mistake, I attempted to fix it with a khaki dry brushing. And maybe it's better? Moving on to the balloon, which came out a lot better in my opinion, I base coated it in a very nice sky blue. And after that dried, I mixed up a dark blue wash and applied it to the balloon. I felt the balloon was just too one note, if you know what I mean. And I felt that a dark blue wash gave it that extra pop that it needed. Once the balloon was dry, I glued it onto the base we made earlier, and then I added the meat igloo, which means we were ready for the flocking. We're going to start off with making whatever the heck this is. People will say it's moss, but it's paper mache to me. I mixed up another batch of paper mache milk, but this time I added a 100% green color to it. But once it dried, it somehow dried yellow instead of green, which is still an absolute mystery to me. I swear I used green paint. Well, whatever, we can easily fix this with a nice green wash. Next on the flocking list is filler. No, not lip filler, flocking filler. I started by chopping up a kitchen sponge in several shapes and pieces, then I glued them down on the base, making sure to place them around the foots of the balloon. However, I didn't like how flat and dull it looked, so I broke out some actual real moss that I got from Walmart of all places. I added the moss over all the previous flocking, which was harder by the way, but it was the right choice. It looks better or more overgrown like in the game. This flocking good time ended with this little tree, which was just a stick I found on the ground. I flocked it with some thicker foliage and placed it right behind the meat igloo. Okay, time is running out, so let's make Rubelle's circus box. We start with this wooden cube, then we glue on crafting foam strips. Next, some rhinestones as rivets. And finally, for the sun insignia, I used a sun charm of all things. I cut it in half and then glued it on with super glue. I gave it a quick paint, then placed it in its forever home. The very last thing I added was the weight counter bags, and that was it. Roll the glamour shots. Well, thank you for watching, y'all. This build was both a learning experience and quite the challenge for me, but I had a lot of fun with it. If I didn't mention it before, I have never used paper mache before, and I was truly figuring it out as I went along, which is what I do most of the time. But it came out good, so I'm happy. If you like this video, give it a like, and if you're not already, please subscribe. Always remember, be kind and rewind, and I'll see you in the next one, real soon.